So as we show you more images of Soweto in a bid to find the brand DNA of arguably the world's most famous township, let's return now to our studio as we go in depth with Sir Martin Sorrell, who heads WPP. It's the world's largest advertising and communications conglomerate. He was in South Africa recently and spoke exclusively to Mags on Media. We start as he picks up a question on a statement made in Europe recently on whether it was game over for the West.
You're right that there are challenges. There will be challenges as a result of what's going on in Western Europe and perhaps later on in the United States as President Obama or an alternative, I think it's likely to be President Obama in his second term, wrestle with the US deficit, which I think is the biggest issue. I think the Western European crisis is not a sideshow. It's obviously very difficult, but it's certainly one of two things that the West has to deal with. And if we don't deal with it effectively, the West will be under increasing pressure. And the opportunities in the East and the South in Latin America and Southeast in Africa and the Middle East will become even more paramount.
So Martin, let's focus on Africa now. Is there not too much infrastructural and economic disparity, I wonder, to make things work effectively for a group like yours?
It is difficult because the continent is split into a large number of countries, very different cultures, very different languages, very different approaches. One of the key issues for us is how we can develop a coherent strategy in Sub-Saharan, in South Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa and the Middle East. There are obviously not just economic challenges of the sort you mentioned, infrastructure challenges, but political challenges as well. The prospects are quite difficult, and I'm not as optimistic actually to the point about the Middle East and the solving or the solutions to those issues that I was, say, even a few months ago. Now, given our history in Africa, we have a very strong business. I mean, over the $1 billion of revenue that we have in Africa and the Middle East, it breaks down about 650 in Africa and about 350 in the Middle East. And actually, of that 650, 500 million is here in South Africa, and there's another 150 million in the rest of the continent of Africa. So you can see from those figures we have a lot more to do in East Africa, in West Africa and North Africa. That's the opportunity, the potential, but the challenge for us is to get some coherence in it. Having said that, if you look at the opportunities in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Angola and other countries in Africa, there are very significant opportunities.
All right, let me bring it back to South Africa if I can and maybe look at the investment potential of this country. You must be worried, surely. There is talk of nationalisation, the much discussed Protection of Information Bill, much discussion about the media tribunal. Are we shooting ourselves in the foot?
My view is to be quite sort of, if not relaxed, to understand these changes. People, particularly in difficult economic times, sometimes take what we would regard, particularly if you're liberal in your economic thinking, sometimes take regressive moves. My view is quite simple. These markets, to which, frankly, WPP's future depends. I mean, our future geographically is going to be determined by, we've got first mover advantage in Brazil, in Russia, in India, in China, and in South Africa, and I believe in Africa as a continent, because we've certainly been the most aggressive of any of the companies in our industry in building their business in Africa. We have to take advantage of this, whatever the pitfalls are, whatever the protectionism is, whatever whether we disagree or agree. My view is these markets are higher reward, higher risk markets.
All right, let's talk about speed and technology now. You seem to have a very emphatic view, don't you, towards social networking. You also say that the platforms are not necessarily the right context for promotional advertising because, if I've got the quote right, they interrupt something that is supposed to be fluent and informal.
That's probably a little bit extreme interpretation. I said two things, really. One is that for brand building, to build brands, social networks are extremely effective. So that's one thing. The second thing is that social networks are what they say they are. They are social interactions. I mean, I somewhat unkindly, maybe inadvisably, say that they're advanced forms of letter writing. We used to write letters to one another. we now interact with one another in a phenomenal way. I mean, don't get me wrong. The social networks such as Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus now, which will be an increasing competitor to Facebook in the future, are all extremely powerful networks that our clients and ourselves are using more and more effectively. But it's much more subtle. These are social interactions, and if you interfere or if you interrupt, particularly at the wrong time, social interactions, you could be punished for it.
Yet, Sir Martin, it would seem that brands have become almost fixated on social media. I wonder if that's to their detriment.
We become fixated with fashionable things, and you know, no CEO is going to get upset with a chief marketing officer who spends more or invests more in digital media. It was quite seductive at the beginning because instead of spending large amounts of money on television, you remember the famous Lord Leverhulme quote about, "I know I waste half my advertising, but I don't know which half." I mean, we're now getting to grips, and one of the beauties about online is we think and we probably know a little bit more at this stage, and probably a lot more in the future, about how people are reacting to the commercial messages that are displayed or that are sent out. What we've seen is quite interesting. I mean, if I look at worldwide budgets for 2011, I think our clients are spending about 17% of their budgets worldwide on online. We know that you and I, Jeremy, spend about 25% of our time, or consumers generally, online. At WPP, about 30% of our revenues are now online. By virtue of the fact we're at 30, is we think it's going to go further. We actually want to get about 35 to 40% of our $16 billion of revenue around the world into the online areas of PC, video content, social networking, and the like. That's where we'd like to be. So there's more to go for, actually.
All right, let's move away from social media if we can. I read that you're still a great believer, a great proponent of the power and efficacy of television. Why?
Yes, I am. I referred before to the Twin Peaks. And one of the really interesting things about 2010, we described it as America and traditional media biting back, particularly television. When we talk about screens, the definitions are changing as we speak. Traditionally, as a 66-year-old, I probably wouldn't traditionally like to watch a football match or a cricket match or a rugby match on a smartphone or a BlackBerry. Today, new generations are totally comfortable doing that. The place that is really under pressure is the traditional delivery of newspapers and indeed periodicals. You know, cutting down trees and distributing newsprint is economically not a great model. From an environmental point of view, it's not a good model either. And digital delivery, which is a new form of delivering that content, is extremely powerful, extremely effective, and with the growth of tablets and smartphones is going to be the way that it gets delivered.
WPP's Sir Martin Sorrell talking to us earlier in the week. Let's return now to our quest for the essence of brand Soweto. It's all very well talking to the experts, but what do the people that live here actually think?
I love Soweto because that's where I'm making a living. Tourists always come here and we are meeting different people from different countries.
Soweto means love, peace, happiness, because we are diverse nations and we are different type of cultures, yet we bind together as a one big family.
I was born, bred and buttered in this particular township. I enjoy everything about it.
Behind me, the famous Orlando soccer stadium. It certainly is a brand icon as far as Soweto is concerned. When Mags on Media continues, we'll tell you how a leading health and gym club got its clients here in Soweto to design the exercise and retail space for it.